Did you grow up with a NES, PlayStation, Star Wars, cartoons, and 80s TV? Do you like to think who would win in a fight between Batman and the Master Chief? Comics, games, movies, music, and TV, they're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of geeks. Games, movies, music, and TV, they're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of This Week in Geek. This Week in Geek.
Well, hello, everybody. We are technically on March break, even though March break ended last week. We took a week, maybe 10 days off, so Birdman could catch up on some schoolwork, also take some much needed rest during the March break anyway. Same with me, and to catch up on a bunch of reviews items we had to do. I still got a pile of movies and stuff to go through, but I have mostly caught up on the games that we were reviewing. That's what happens when you get a bunch of RPGs and other titles all at once, and Birdman had a bunch of RPG, like, tabletop books to go through. So he said, hey, Alex, would you like to do a TurdOrTreasure episode? And I said, I would love to if we can get some stuff done. So it's actually out a day or two later than we wanted it to be, but we now have all of our reviews ready. So for this, it's going to be just around Robin, where Birdman goes first, then me, then Birdman, then me. I have Triangle Strategy in here, as well as The Cursed King from NISAmerica. Birdman has 3 reviews. I know we might have more, but we might save those for our regular show this upcoming week. But what he has for us is Gale Force 9's Wise Guys board game, as well as Star Trek Adventures Player's Guide, and he has In Search of Tomorrow, the 80s sci-fi doc, that I believe has a physical sale going on till the end of the weekend, of this upcoming weekend. So that'll be sort of the middle show that this is the centerpiece of this, because I know we both been waiting to watch it. I didn't get a chance to see the screener yet. He has. So I might check it out afterwards if we still have availability of that. If not, I will wait until the full doc is out, because I'm highly anticipating it. We're going to sort of jump in between each one, back and forth, and I'll come back at the end just to sort of say what's up, what's coming soon, and what other things you can expect from us in the next few weeks. Okay, so I guess we're going to throw it over to Birdman with his first review.
I grew up in a tough neighborhood. Sometimes a reputation follows you.
Want to get Capone? Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way.
Hey guys, this is Mike the Birdman here, and I'm here to take a look at something really neat that we got from our friends over at Gale Force 9. I'm talking about the board game Wise Guys, a game of money, guns, and booze set in Prohibition-era Chicago. I'm a big fan of almost anything Prohibition. I really liked The Untouchables when I watched that for the first time last year. I'm always been a fan of like crime movies, that sort of thing. I love Scarface, and you know, it's cool in its own little way, and it's nice to see something Prohibition that doesn't deal with, you know, Call of Cthulhu and Eldritch Horrors. So what this game is, it's you take control of one of 4 gangs in Chicago, and the object is to make money. And the player with the most money at the end of the game wins. The game takes about 6 rounds to play. I think our play session was like an hour or so. And you do that by selling booze and stuff like that. But there's a mechanic in the game, in the black market. If there's more booze on the market, then the price goes down. And basically, you kind of have to weigh what happens with it. You can issue orders on your turn, but you can do that to like get more people in your gang and stuff like that. You can have associates turn into made men, so there's a lot of like mafia talk in here. There's like even one of the players becomes the boss of bosses, stuff like that. Really neat stuff. So you'd have like the starting locations like City Hall, and then 6 other tiles, which will be whatever other locations. And it's basically you fighting it out over so many turns, 6 turns. And then you'll have things, there's like hassles, opportunities, and last calls, which can affect things. Like, maybe there's a new mayor in town, maybe the cops are cracking down on things. Stuff like that. Stuff that can really make things really bad for you or really, really, really help you. Stuff like that. But combat is not always resolved with guns or fists. And if you bring a gun to a fist fight, people lose respect for you. Metaphorically speaking, but there's also a game component to that as well, which, again, I think is really kind of cool. Because manly men fight with fists, and it's ridiculous, or whatever. But I do think this game's a lot of fun, and I did a little bit of research on this, and I found out this is like a reskin-ish with some updated mechanics and a few other key changes from the Sons of Anarchy board game. Honestly, I would much rather have this than Sons of Anarchy. Just because, like I said, I dig the idea, I dig the setting, I think it's a lot of fun. So, I kind of hope they do more with this. I would love to see a like New York expansion or something like that. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. Like, I'm just throwing out ideas. I think there's a lot more gas in the proverbial tank, or there's more hooch hidden under your coat. So if you want to check out a really fun board game that I really suggest for you and your friends, this game is, I think, meant for ages 13 and up. The game is called Wise Guys. Once again, coming to us from Gale Force 9. It definitely greases the right amount of wheels. So I'm definitely impressed with this. Once again, Wise Guys from Gale Force 9. Check this game out.
What? They got the shipment.
What?
They got the whole shipment.
I want that son of a bitch dead. I want him dead. I want him dead. I don't care. What am I, alone in this world? Did I ask you what you're trying to do? Did I ask you what you're trying to do? I want you to get this fuck where he breathes. I want him dead. I want his family dead. I want his house burnt to the ground. I want to go to the middle of the night. I want to piss on his ass.
This is a fair request, and I promise I will not judge any person only as a teenager, and that this is no more right than saying all teenagers are drunken dope addicts or glue sniffers.
Alex here with a quick review of The Cruel King and The Great Hero, which is a new game brought to us by NISAmerica. A review copy was provided, and this is a game that I was picking up in between some of the larger review projects I was working on, and I found myself compelled to play it fairly regularly. It became sort of my game that I played for bits and pieces before I would go to bed. Now, I was playing this on the PlayStation platform, but it is, I believe, also available on Nintendo Switch. PS4 version obviously works in PS5, so I'm playing it on the PS5 in backwards compat mode. It is interesting in that it looks like a children's book come to life. I was trying to think before this review recording which particular style. What's that one? Is it Paper Bag Princess? I think that's what it's called. Yeah, it's like Robert Munch style is sort of how it looks, but with a bit of a Japanese edge to it, obviously. And in the game, it's a traditional JRPG turn-based game, something that you would have seen maybe out of the late 90s, mid to late 90s. Even though, it's NISAmerica, it has almost like an Atlas, not even Atlas, even before that, like an Enix, like a pre-Square-Enix title. If I had to give, a sort of distinct feel for the design, you play the game. There's a narrator that narrates what's happening and also does voices for the characters. It is one of the rare JRPG turn-based games that is family-friendly enough that I don't think there'd be any objections to having kids play it. It's got an ESRB rating of E10 plus, for fantasy violence, and I think the use of alcohol is probably the reason it got the 10 plus. But it's if you ignore that one little aspect or consider it just to be part of the fantasy, I can see any family members playing it. And it's been a while. Outside of Pokemon, there's not a lot of turn-based RPGs that any kid can play. The battle system is simple enough, but it is a very stylized, cool, like I said, hand-drawn, like book come to life feel. It's not that HD 2D look that you see with the Square-Enix titles where they're doing it. This is like a hand-drawn picture pop-up book kind of aesthetic. Audio-wise, it's pretty competently handled. The music is nothing to write home about, but does suit the game very well. The visuals are the big key point here of how visually appealing it is, and it's a calm enough game, and there's nothing like too scary or anything major that you could just, again, play it before bed like I did and have a pretty good time with it. There's a robust enough battle system that it's not going to get boring, but it's simple enough that anybody can pick up and play. And it's actually a pretty good starter RPG, or something if I played it on the PlayStation. It's something that is going to work well on the Switch as well. So if you are looking to pick up a game that you can take with you on the go, an RPG that's not too, deep when it comes to graphics or going to slow down or anything, it's going to work well in portable mode and is good for the whole family, then The Cruel King and The Great Hero is probably one you might want to check out.
Logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Or the one.
Can you say E.T.? E.T. E.T.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
Hey guys, this is Mike the Birdman here, and I'm here to talk to you about a special review that we got a chance to take a look at from Creator VC. We are talking about In Search of Tomorrow, the definitive 80s sci-fi documentary directed by David Weiner and produced by Robin Block. So we've actually talked with these guys a few times before in the past regarding In Search of Darkness Parts 1 and 2, and I interviewed David regarding In Search of Tomorrow a while ago on the podcast. So you pretty much know what you're going to be getting here. You are getting a almost 5-hour-long documentary talking with so many people from the world of 80s sci-fi. You've got Peter Wells in there, Nancy Allen, Kurtwood Smith, Clancy Brown. There's an astrophysicist in there. John Carpenter shows up. Nick Castle. I didn't know he directed The Last Starfighter. There are like so many people in this. It is ridiculously long and takes an incredible amount of time to even list them, but they also bring back Shane Black, Bruce Boxleitner, who played Tron, Barry Bostwick from Megaforce, and Joey Kramer from Flight of the Navigator. Like, there are so many people in this, but they also have people involved from other angles of production, like sound editors, composers. Brad Fiedel from the Terminator shows up. The director of Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, Adam Nimoy, shows up. There's a lot of really interesting stories here. And what sets In Search of Tomorrow apart from the In Search of Darkness documentaries is that this one feels a little bit more accessible. And I was watching this with my roommate Shannon the other night, and she brought up a really, really, really good point, because this isn't just confined to talking about horror movies, for example. This one is focused on sci-fi, but it also branches out into some of the culture and some of the other things that were happening during the 1980s. There's actually an entire section regarding space flight and the Challenger and sort of the impact that had on movies at the time, like Space Camp. I think Life Force was also mentioned. And they also had Walter Koenig, the guy who plays Chekhov, speak about this too, talking about seeing the first shuttle that was named Enterprise was a cool thing for him. But they also brought out another person who said there was a time where this could have been it for American space travel, because now we've had people die. We've had civilians die. And that's a really interesting thought. But they also talk about the Cold War, the effects of movies like war games and stuff like that. There's another one where they talk about a movie called Miracle Mile, which now I really, really want to see. Basically, what if you knew the world was going to end in about 79 minutes and there's nothing you can do about it? That's really, really, really cool. Like, I'm just so impressed with so many of these movies I never knew existed. And then they also talk about a really tragic story about a movie called Galaxina, which starred a Playboy playmate who was unfortunately murdered. And they say the movie was goofy in all the right ways, but they wonder what it could have been had things been allowed to go forward and let the thing breathe a little bit. But they also talk about movies like Explorers and how the plug got pulled on that, and they just said, screw it, put it out in theaters, we don't care anymore. And I remember seeing that movie in college with my friends Shep and Adam, and that movie was weird. But there is so much here that I'm so glad that I sat down and learned. The In Search of documentaries always paint a very interesting picture of the topic that they cover. And I felt like this one also drew in a lot more experts than the previous ones. Like, I really liked, there's an astrophysicist, there's a clinical psychologist, there were several doctors, if I remember right, and there was like men, women, and just everybody involved from all levels of production, people in front of the camera, people behind the camera, producers. There's no way for me to really sum up just how much I learned from this. I know I now have a list as long as my arm to go and seek out some of these movies. And that's another thing, when I talked about this with David a long time ago, when you talk about digital preservation of movies, some of these movies may only be available on YouTube, or unless you have access to original prints of the movie. Some of these could be remarkably hard to find, but if you look on streaming services like Tubi, if you're willing to plumb the depths of Amazon Prime, depending on what region you're in, you might be able to find some of these lost classics. I know there's a few that I really want to see. There's one called The Final Countdown that isn't, the song by Europe. I really want to see that, where it's about it's about a futuristic aircraft carrier that goes back to Pearl Harbor. Do they intervene and save Pearl Harbor, or do they risk the entire future on a what if? So there's some incredibly cool stuff here. And it also features, as far as I know, some of the last interview footage with Ivan Reitman before he passed away just recently. So that's a person I didn't quite expect. So I'm really glad that I sat down and watched this. I'm a little disappointed we didn't get some of the big guns, like, say, Sigourney Weaver or, say, Michael Biehn. Like, there were some notable absences, but they did fill in where they needed to. I felt each big get they get, like getting John Carpenter and Peter Weller and Clancy Brown, but they also bring in other people like Jeanette Goldstein, Mark Ralston, Barry Bostwick, and the actor from Flight of the Navigator, Joey Kramer. So it's cool. You get to see everything. So if you want to purchase this, you can do this for the next week or so. And if you want to check this out, you go to 80scifidoc.com. You can get a physical copy. It retails for about $69.99 USD, and that's the standard Blu-ray. You get the Blu-ray, the digital copy, you get 3 posters, your name in the credits, a digital soundtrack, and some stickers. So check that out. Once again, that's 80scifidoc.com. In Search of Tomorrow gets a most definite recommendation from us here at This Week in Geek.
Do you have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
Hold that thought. It's crapper time.
It is time to finally talk about triangle strategy. formerly known as Project Triangle Strategy, formerly thought of as to maybe be the next Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's certainly not lacking when it comes to that pedigree, but it is obviously the start of a new franchise, new series. Hopefully, fingers crossed that it sells well enough. And as of this recording, I believe it had just passed the 1 million sales mark, which is pretty good for a new franchise, specifically on one platform and using that 2D HD style. It doesn't have, like the big Final Fantasy moniker behind it to push those sales. So on its own merits, it's obviously doing quite well. Nintendo did provide me with a review copy, but I received it day of release, full disclosure. So, usually we have our reviews ready to go either the day of release or a couple days after, or we try to get them within a week of release. But because this is a pretty involved game with multiple pathways you can take, and you're going to get different endings depending on what you do with different characters, it's one of the few times where I actually did a playthrough and a half, nearly 2 full playthroughs to try to get a gist of everything by changing some of my decisions. So that's why we're, at the 2-week mark now when it's coming out. So it's not that it's so late, it's better late than never, but I wanted to make sure we had a pretty exhaustive review done so that I could give my full thoughts. I'm not going to be spoilery with the story, because that's the biggest factor here is the different paths you're going to take. You're going to have a slightly different experience pretty much every time you play, depending on which characters you recruit into your party and the decisions you make, who you're able to actually sway. If you've played the demo, or either of the demos, you have an idea of what the game is like. You have the traditional tactical RPG scenario modes where in between battles you can view your characters, you can make decisions, and certain decisions you make will lead down the pathways to get other characters or have different conflicts or different fights on different maps, as well as just in general shaping the entire outcome of your game. It's pretty good that way. It's robust. It's also got a decent difficulty curve. It's nothing's too difficult here that you're going to be wiped out, and obviously you can select modes for that, and you can. This isn't the traditional JRPG tactical game of old yore, where it was generally thought of as being impossibly hard for most people. This is a very accessible, but yet not boring. It's very challenging at the right level game. Is this going to be maybe your first tactical RPG? You could do that because it is engrossing enough. The visuals are absolutely beautiful. The voice acting is great. It's pretty much these games, these 2.5 HD, games like the Octopath, the little modes we've seen in like the Final Fantasy VI Pixel remaster, the upcoming Live Alive, and potentially more. They are some of the most exciting things I've seen from Square-Enix in years. Where I'm more excited for these. I would call them A titles. They're probably not AAA because they don't have those, huge exorbitant budgets like a Final Fantasy VII Remake does. But these are almost more exciting. They're turning out so good each time. And, I'm not going to gush too much on it. The audio, the music is fantastic. The visuals are pretty much the best you're going to get from this style on the Switch. And I'd be really interested to see, maybe in the future, down the line, like they did with Octopath, where it ended up going to other platforms, what it looks like in true rendered in 4K. Because as it stands at 1080p and 720, whatever it is in the portable mode, it looks great, especially with the particle effects when I'm using it on my Nintendo Switch OLED edition. And then on my regular standard TV, it blows up to a 65-inch TV, and it's not, overly pixelated, even though that's the style it's in. I'm not like noticing big blocky pixels. It's beautiful the whole time. Now the gameplay, the strategy is there. It's not as difficult as some other strategy games. And if you do end up losing on a map, or you want to reload or go back, you have a general idea of where things are going to go. It's pretty intuitive where people are going to come into. You're not really going to be completely thrown off by a surprise attack, but even then they shake it up now and then with elements and modes of what you need to do. For instance, you can take an enemy head on, or you can go to an area and burn a house down that will then kill a bunch of enemies below. That was in one of the demos. Elements like that are explored a fair bit more in the game as you go into it. It is one of the best games I've played in portable mode, again, because of how visually impressive it is. It just scales so well. This is, if you've played, maybe, you know how there was the Fire Emblem, they had that remake, I guess the remastered version of like the original Nintendo one that came out, was it a couple years ago we talked about on, and you could get it on the Nintendo eShop. This is maybe you might want to jump into this after that. There's other games that have come out recently that we've talked about that have a similar style, but maybe not, the same exact flair for the 2D HD look. But this is probably creme de la creme, cream of the crop, best tactical RPG of the last few years, especially on a Nintendo platform.
Where's your stubbornness now, Picard, your arrogance? Do you still profess to be prepared for what awaits you?
Greetings, Starfleet officers. It is I, Lieutenant Commander Birdman, once again returning from Space Dock from Utopia Planitia Shipyards. That's right, I'm here to take a look at yet another source book from Star Trek Adventures. This time we are looking at the Star Trek Adventures Player's Guide from Modiphius. We took a look at the Game Master Guide a while ago, and I really had a good time with that, kind of realizing I probably can run Star Trek Adventure stuff because I was always a little nervous about setting up my own version of the Star Trek experience. The Player's Guide offers me a different perspective for being a better player, and that's kind of how I judge most players' guides. Will this actually make you a better player? Or, simply put, will you actually take the time to actually read said player's guide to become a better player? And you might be asking yourself, well, this game has been out for a couple of years. Why is it taking so long for this to come out? Well, the answer is, I don't have one for you. But what you are getting here is something that, if you're willing to take the time to really read and dive into and kind of give yourself over to the Star Trek experience, you're going to have a better time overall. One of the best things I found in this book mechanically is how it breaks down different roles on the ship. Like, if you're in charge of operations, for example, what can you do with that? How does that affect momentum and stuff like that? Another one which is unique to the Klingon Defense Force, although you could easily do it because there are examples in Star Trek, most notably Neelix. They talk about the ship's cook. There's even a random table that you can roll for what the ship's cook is making that day. There's like a protein and a sauce, so that's kind of funny. But they also talk about the role of a flight controller / con officer, talk about being a ship's counselor, and they even have a little section where they kind of talk about, because you are playing a ship's counselor and this is a game of make-believe, be careful of triggering actual trauma. Basically, when you have that conversation at the table about safety, how do you proceed forward from that? And I thought that was a really good piece of advice. Plus, towards the end of the book, where it starts to break things down into the more mechanical parts of Star Trek that aren't just fluff and lore, it breaks it down in ways you can understand. Like, if you have a high reason stat and a high something else, maybe you're an expert sharpshooter. If you have a really good fitness plus something else, okay, it means you can do X. It also gives you, in older D&D editions and older magazines, they would give you what is the normal range for your race and kind of give you examples like, oh, if you're like this, you are sickly. If you are like this, you are super buff. Stuff like that. And it kind of details how trained you are or how experienced you are. And I found that really valuable in helping create the Star Trek character that you want. Stuff like that. They even give you rules for how to break down childlike characters if you want to play a character like, say, Wesley Crusher or Icheb from Voyager. It gives you ideas for that. So overall, can I recommend the Star Trek Adventures Player's Guide? Yeah, if it's something that you and your group, if you really want to create a deeper and more authentic Star Trek Adventures experience, I think this is invaluable. And I also recommend Game Masters read this book too, because it allows you to work with your players to create something. So whether you're having the blockbuster cinematic experience of fighting the Borg Queen in First Contact sort of thing, or you want something a little bit more intriguey and you're dealing with like Section 31 or something like that. It gives you ideas on how to work with the characters and let them give you ideas and create something a little bit more enriching for everybody. So yeah, as a player's guide, I think this succeeds. As a Game Master's toolkit, I think this gives you options to make the game better for your players so they can enjoy their adventures aboard the USS whatever, going into the Shackleton Expanse, the Gamma Quadrant, or wherever. So I wholly recommend the Star Trek Adventures Player's Guide from Modiphius, and you should probably check that out. So anyway, until next time, this is Lieutenant Commander Birdman, one to beam out.
Does Data say why he wants to see us?
He said something about his new image. I tell you, he's been acting kind of strange lately.
How so?
Well, if I didn't know better, I'd say he was showing signs of insecurity.
Yes, but you do know better. Androids don't feel such things.
I don't know. Sometimes I think he's becoming more human than any of us realize.
Those magnificent bastards! Color me kooky, but something very odd is going on around here.
You're not allowed to talk anymore.
And that's going to do it for the show this week. We've got more reviews coming for our regular show this weekend. I will not be on it as it's my grandmother's 88th birthday. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but this might be the last one. She's had some health issues and she has dementia. And it's starting to get to the point where it's flipping a coin, whether it's a lucid day or a day where she's in a fog. So we're spending as much time as we can celebrating with her. So I will be going there this weekend. Birdman will be on his own. We are going to be recording, knock on wood. The plan was to have a couple of reviews that we're recording together because we both received the Godfather trilogy in the 4K remastered sets. So I think the plan is to talk about that together. There might be another one. I'm not 100% sure. If not, there'll be another review from me, which is probably going to be the Magnum PI original TV series, the entire series on Blu-ray, which I'm slowly working my way through, seeing episodes I don't remember, which turns out to be a lot. As well as I have a few other reviews that I'm working on, some Mill Creek releases that are like compilations of like conspiracy theory movies and stuff, which is kind of interesting. I also have, what else? Well Go USA movie I'm working on. It looks like a South Korean sci-fi movie, so I'll check that out. I've also got The Last Waltz on 4K UHD from the Criterion Collection. And I think there's a couple others as well. And plus, we still got the Trauma films that we're going to work on for when we come back doing our regular Loose Cannon programming. I'm really hoping to do that next week sometime with Aaron. I might record it this week, I'm not sure, and then release it sometime next week. We'll see. Hopefully. I'll work out some scheduling there, and then Birdman will be back regularly on that too soon. We had held off hoping he would come back for the first episode, but it looks like timing isn't going to 100% work for that, so we'll just get it out anyway. As far as other stuff, I know Birdman has a bunch of other projects he's working on with some reviews that are coming. A lot of tabletop RPGs. And I've got a bunch coming in the mail myself. So it's going to be an interesting, I think, RPG year for us when it comes to extra content and our extracurriculars. As far as programming on the site goes, there's going to be a new syndicated episode of Fools Who Ride from the Nerd to the Third crew. There might be another one. I'm not sure if they're posting another one yet, but I know they recorded something. So there'll be that. Then there's also going to be more of Aaron and Darlene's Earth versus Soup episodes. They've gone back to the regular programming of one per week now that we're ramping up production and everything else. That being said, it's not going to be the Wednesdays that it originally was. We're going to probably keep episodes coming on Thursdays to sort of balance things out a little bit, leaving our Tuesdays and Wednesdays open for when we do specials or other things like Loose Cannon or Future Imperfect. And we'll keep Fridays for special occasions or for TurdOrTreasures. And then Saturdays will be the open episodes if we got interviews or anything extra like that to put out, as well as whenever we have regular new episodes of our actual play role-playing games. So we've got 2 episodes ready to go, 2 episodes that are ready for Birdman to edit and get ready. That'll be returning either this week or next week of the campaign we're doing for Stargate. We've got other games, as I said, on order to do some one-offs, especially during the summertime. And then Sundays, we'll be returning to having Sunday Funnies when Birdman can schedule himself to record a bunch with JT. And as usual, the regular show will come out Mondays, unless there's an embargo. Sometimes that forces us to have them out later in the day. You can usually expect at 7 a.m. Eastern time. Or if, life gets in the way, generally Tuesday morning at the latest. But that's it right now. We're bracing for a pretty big storm coming. Apparently it's going to be an ice storm with like multiple inches of rain and ice, and like it was a few years ago when we had the really bad power outages. So we're trying to get some stuff done ahead of time, seeing as it looks like in the next day or two it's going to be pretty rough. So outside of that, not much else going on. We're just keeping on trucking, and you'll hear me probably talk with Birdman on the next show in one of our reviews, and I'll be back sometime next week.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.